Welcome to episode 11 of The Story Behind the Painting by MUZEA. Today, we are exploring a work that defines the Italian Renaissance. It is an image so ubiquitous it has been printed on everything from postcards to fashion runways, yet its mystery remains as deep as the sea from which its subject emerged. We are looking at The Birth of Venus, painted by Sandro Botticelli. Created around 1485 to 1486, this is not just a painting, it was a revolution. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a large-scale, non-religious nude was produced in Europe. It signaled a rebirth of classical antiquity and the dawn of a new humanistic era. Currently, it resides in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, where it remains the crown jewel of their collection.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous art works and learn a lot from that.
Before we dive into the mythology and the gods themselves, let's peel back the layers and look at the bones of this masterpiece. The Birth of Venus is massive, a sweeping expanse measuring roughly 1.72 by 2.78 meters. To stand before it is to be dwarfed by it. But what's truly revolutionary isn't just the size, it's the surface. In the 1480s, high art in Florence was almost exclusively painted on heavy, rigid poplar wood panels. Yet Botticelli chose canvas. Today, we take canvas for granted, but back then, this was a radical, modern choice. The painting was destined for a Medici country villa, and canvas was lighter, cheaper, and crucially, it could be rolled up for transport. But there was an aesthetic genius to this choice too. Unlike the glass-like finish of sanded wood, the subtle tooth of the fabric breaks up the light. It gives the skin of the figures a soft, matte quality, a velvet-like luminescence that wood simply cannot replicate. Then there is the medium, tempera grassa. Botticelli bound his pigments with egg yolk and just a touch of oil, allowing him to paint with microscopic precision. If you look at high-definition scans, you won't see broad, blended brushstrokes. Instead, you see thousands of tiny hatched lines building up the skin tones layer by layer. To protect this delicate work, he applied a thin varnish of pure egg white, a secret that has kept these colors vibrant for over 5 centuries. And he didn't stop at paint. Botticelli was a trained goldsmith before he was a painter, and it shows. He used crushed Lapis Lazuli, a semi-precious stone brought all the way from Afghanistan, to create the deep blues of the sea and the cornflowers. Then he added the divine spark, actual gold leaf. He touched the highlights of the hair, the wings of the winds, and even the trunks of the orange trees with gold. Imagine this in the 15th century, flickering by candlelight in a dark villa. Those gold accents would have literally sighed with light, making Venus appear as if she were radiating from within the canvas. But as you settle into the beauty, you might notice something wrong. The proportions are otherworldly. If you look closely at her neck, it is impossibly long. Her left shoulder slopes at a steep, unnatural angle that seems to melt into her arm. Make no mistake, these aren't errors. If a real woman possessed Venus's proportions, she would struggle to even stand. She is in a contrapposto pose, resting her weight on one leg, yet she leans so far to her right that she should, by all laws of physics, tip over. Why did Botticelli do this? Because he wasn't interested in the heavy, scientific realism that was obsessed over by his peers. He was chasing a higher truth, perfect grace. Influenced by the flowing curves of Gothic art, he distorted her body to remove her from our world. She isn't your neighbor standing in a shell. She is the celestial Venus, an idea of beauty so pure it is weightless. She doesn't even stand on the shell, she floats above it. Finally, notice the rhythmic line. While other masters like Leonardo were using sfumato to blur edges into shadows, Botticelli did the opposite. He used dark, firm contour lines to define his figures. This gives the painting a graphic, almost tapestry-like energy. The swirling hair, the fluttering silk of the robes, the zigzag ripples of the water, it all creates a visual melody. The painting doesn't just sit there, it flows, guiding your eye across the 9-foot span in one continuous lyrical movement. So what exactly are we witnessing in this frozen moment of divine theater? The painting depicts the immediate aftermath of a cosmic event, the arrival of Venus on the shores of Cyprus, or Cythera. According to the Greek poet Hesiod, she was born from the sea foam, a daughter of the sky and the salt. On the left, we encounter the primary force of the painting's movement, Zephyrus, the god of the west wind. He is powerful, his muscles tensed as he exhales the very air that drives Venus toward the shore. But he isn't alone. He is locked in a passionate, airborne embrace with a nymph. Most scholars identify her as Chloris, the goddess of flowers. Their union is a visual representation of the fertilizing power of nature, the wind and the earth coming together to bring life. If you look closely at their lips, you can see the spiritus, or breath, represented by soft, golden lines that guide the viewer's eye directly to the center of the canvas. And then there are the roses. They drift through the air around the couple, seemingly weightless. Legend tells us the rose was created at the exact moment Venus was born. Botticelli paints them with pale petals and sharp thorns, a subtle reminder that while love is the height of beauty, it carries the potential for pain. In the center, standing upon the scalloped edge of her shell, is Venus herself. She is the anchor of the composition. Her pose is a direct homage to the Venus Pudica, or modest Venus, a standard of classical sculpture. But notice her expression. She doesn't look at the winds blowing her, nor the goddess waiting to clothe her. Her gaze is distant, melancholic, and serene. Her skin is treated with a marble-like finish, pale, luminous, and almost translucent. By rendering her this way, Botticelli bridges the gap between a statue come to life and a divine spirit. She is the Venus Coelestis, the celestial Venus, representing a form of love that is intellectual and spiritual rather than merely physical. Finally, on the right, the movement of the wind meets the stability of the land. A female figure rushes forward to greet the goddess. This is one of the Horae, the goddesses of the seasons, specifically the Hora of spring. Look at the extraordinary detail in her attire. She wears a white silk dress embroidered with blue cornflowers, symbols of devotion. Around her neck is a garland of evergreen myrtle, and a belt of pink roses cinches her waist. She isn't just a character, she is the personification of the blossoming earth. In her hands, she holds a magnificent pink cloak, billowing in the same wind that brought Venus to the shore. It is decorated with daisies and primroses, flowers that herald the end of winter. She reaches out to cover the divine nudity of the newcomer, symbolizing the transition from the wild, raw state of nature into the ordered, clothed world of human civilization and culture. Together, these three groups form a cycle, from the breath of the wind to the beauty of the soul, ending in the blossoming of the earth. Now let us step back from the figures and look at the world they inhabit. The landscape Botticelli has created is not a place in the geographic sense. It is a stylized, poetic stage. Notice the sea. There are no crashing waves or deep perspective. Instead, the water is a rhythmic pattern of small V shapes, suggesting ripples rather than a realistic ocean. This flat, tapestry-like quality is intentional. By denying us a deep, realistic space, Botticelli keeps the focus on the symbolic nature of the event. We aren't looking through a window into the real world. We are looking into a sacred vision where every line has a purpose. To the right, the shore is anchored by a lush orange grove. In Renaissance Florence, this was a powerful visual signature. The orange tree, or Medica Mala, was a direct pun on the name of the Medici family, the de facto rulers of the city and Botticelli's most influential patrons. But look closer at the leaves. Botticelli has painstakingly tipped them with actual gold leaf. This gold doesn't just sit on the surface. It mirrors the golden highlights in Venus's windswept hair and the shimmering feathers on the wings of the winds. This creates a divine atmosphere, a sense of a world permeated by a celestial light that gold alone can represent. It suggests that the arrival of Venus has transformed the very nature of the landscape itself. This brings us to the why behind the painting. Why would a deeply Christian society celebrate a pagan goddess in such a monumental way? The answer lies in Neoplatonism, a philosophy that was the intellectual heartbeat of the Medici circle. Led by thinkers like Marsilio Ficino, Neoplatonists sought to reconcile ancient Greek philosophy with Christian faith. They believed that physical beauty was not a distraction, but a ladder. By contemplating the perfect beauty of a figure like Venus, the human soul could be reminded of divine beauty and elevated toward God. In this light, Venus is far more than a mythological character. She is an allegory for the soul being born into the world, purified by the waters of the Spirit. Some scholars even suggest that the birth of Venus was intended as a pagan parallel to the baptism of Christ or the Virgin Mary. By blending these worlds, Botticelli created a symbol of humanitas, the idea that humanity, through the union of spirit and matter, could achieve a state of grace. When you look at her, you aren't just seeing a goddess, you are seeing the Renaissance ideal of the human spirit at its most sublime. Who possessed the audacity to commission such a bold, near-scandalous work? For centuries, the answer was shrouded in mystery, but most fingers point to Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici. Not to be confused with his famous cousin, Lorenzo the Magnificent, Pier Francesco was a titan of intellect and wealth in his own right. This painting wasn't destined for a public church or a dark cathedral. It was created for the private, sun-drenched halls of his Villa di Castello. For the Medici, art was never just art. It was a sophisticated language of power. By commissioning a massive pagan nude, they were projecting their status as the ultimate new men, intellectuals who were comfortable with both the Christian cross and the ancient Greek gods. They were the architects of a new age, where the rediscovery of the past was the fuel for the future. In the privacy of a villa, away from the prying eyes of the street, this painting was a signal of their supreme cultural dominance. And then there is the visionary behind the brush, Sandro Botticelli. Born Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippi, he was a true protégé of the Medici household. While his contemporaries like Leonardo da Vinci were obsessed with sfumato, the smoky blurring of edges to create depth, Botticelli was a poet of the silhouette. He didn't care about the physics of shadow, he cared about the rhythm of the line. To Botticelli, a line wasn't just a border, it was a musical note. You can see it in the way the hair flows like liquid or the way the drapery defies gravity. He didn't want to show you how a body sat in space. He wanted to show you how a soul felt in motion. However, the golden era of the Medici was destined to fracture. Later in his life, Florence fell under the shadow of the radical monk Girolamo Savonarola. This fanatic monk preached against the vanities of the world, the fine clothes, the jewelry, and the lascivious paintings of the Renaissance. Botticelli, perhaps suffering from a crisis of faith or simply swept up in the religious fervor of the city, became a follower of Savonarola. In 1497, during the infamous Bonfire of the Vanities, thousands of objects deemed sinful were cast into the flames. Legend says Botticelli himself, distraught and repentant, threw some of his own mythological paintings into the fire. By some miracle of history, perhaps because it was hidden away in the safety of a country villa, the birth of Venus survived the fire. Botticelli's true contribution to the history of art was this: he elevated secular storytelling to the same spiritual height as the biblical. He proved that a Greek myth could carry the same moral weight and divine beauty as a gospel scene. By doing so, he paved the way for centuries of art, from the neoclassicists to the pre-Raphaelites, ensuring that the goddess of love would never truly be silenced by the flames of history. The birth of Venus remains a testament to the moment humanity decided to look back at the beauty of the ancients to find a way forward. It is a painting of movement, of wind, and of the eternal arrival of beauty. Thank you for joining us for episode 11 of The Story Behind the Painting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to MUZEA and check out our previous episodes where we uncover the secrets of the Louvre and the Vatican. To take your art journey further, download the MUZEA app today. Our app allows you to rate and review your favorite museums and galleries around the world. You can also take virtual tours of both permanent collections and temporary exhibitions from the comfort of your home. Explore art, share your voice, and join a global community of culture lovers. I'm your narrator for MUZEA, and we'll see you at the next masterpiece.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous art routes and learn a lot from that.